Oh, wait a minute, wait a minute. Now here we've got to be very careful because there is a certain element of presumptuousness, in my opinion, in your article. You seem to be sure as to how these accounts ought to have been written. Now, of course, had you written them, you would have included material or excluded material that the writers didn't. But that may be the reason why God didn't choose you to write the articles.
I wasn't around then, so.
Exactly, exactly. And so as a historian, what we need to do is to go with what the stuff says, unless we have solid and indeed better reason contemporaneously for not going along with it. And here we have John, who, according to his own students, was an eyewitness to these events, stating that Joseph of Arimathea was a secret disciple.
Also, John, Mr. Nalen, you also have in the fact you have two witnesses here, because in Matthew, he says, as evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Now, the fact is here you've got two witnesses that say the same thing, and a man that's on the council. We can all understand the fact that on the council, he had a lot to lose when they just killed off the person that he is secretly following. At the same time, the evidence that you read in Luke, where it says, now there's a man named Joseph, a member of the council, a good and upright man, who had not consented to their decision and action. And the fact that he did not consent to the whole council's action, there's got to be a pretty good reason why. And that flows with John's account and Matthew's account, the reason why he was a disciple.
The reason why was that he was a pious Jew, and the Roman Empire was not a pretty thing. The Romans were vicious, barbarian pagans. And here you have this Jew, Jesus, who was being crucified by the Romans, put up over the Sabbath, is what they wanted. And Joseph, my understanding, as a pious Jew, just could not stand for that. And
well, that may well be right. That may very well be right. But the point is that the primary accounts, the first-hand testimony, goes beyond that and says, also, he was a secret disciple, and he took down the body and did those various things with it. But let's take the worst possible scenario. Let's say that his servants, by his command, took the body off someplace. The problem that you've got there is that, as the account also says, Nicodemus was privy to this, and obviously other people in those circles would be privy to it, and these events occurred as public events of that time. Everybody was interested in them. To think that he could have somehow, or his servants could somehow have gotten away with stashing that body with all of the interest groups involved in the situation really requires more faith than the resurrection does. You just can't explain it away that way. It was Morrison in his book, Who Moved the Stone, that pointed out that if you're going to doubt the resurrection of Christ, you really got to provide a clean, satisfactory explanation of what happened to this body. And the Joseph of Arimathea explanation is getting you into more hot water than I think you want to get into.
I'm ready. Just give me a second.
Okay. A final statement, because we're out of time for this week and we want to move on. Where do you think the evidence, because what we have said is that you have two witnesses that make a blanket statement, and you have another that really does not contradict it, and yet you want to go a different direction than the material, a concluding statement.
Okay, if you agree with the main scholars who say that Mark is the oldest, and you see that Luke and Matthew are later and John is even later, Mark does not say anything about the guards. He doesn't say anything about Joseph being a disciple of Jesus. And later on, as the young Christian religion is growing and people are fighting it, and they're saying it was just a ghost story and all these things, then you get the later accounts written by people trying to convince others of the reality of the risen Jesus. And human nature is that you put the best foot forward, and maybe you add a little more than you've received.
Yeah, but you don't put your best foot forward when someone is going to chop it off. And the fact of the matter is that all of this stuff, Mark, Matthew, Luke, all of this stuff was circulating among hostile witnesses, among people who had the means, the motive, and the opportunity to blast it if this stuff was not set forth satisfactorily. F.F. Bruce of the University of Manchester has made the very strong point that really the presence of the hostile witnesses turns out to be the legal equivalent of cross-examination. There's no way in the world that they could have gotten away with this, even if, you're right, that they introduced it as a kind of subsequent explanation so as to put their best foot forward.
How could we hear
Well, we're
from
out of
them?
time this week, guys. Just finish that up, and we'll pick it up again next week.
Well, I was simply going to make the point that the disciples, the very people who wrote this stuff, had the temerity, the stupidity to go to the Jewish synagogues to present this. That would have been the worst thing to do if Mr. Nayland was right and that the stuff had been added later in order to make the story look better. Because in the Jewish synagogues were the rabbis, the Jewish religious leaders that had come in from the diaspora and had been present, many of them, at the time these very events had transpired.